Dorothea Puente was a grandmotherly figure who wore old-fashioned dresses, neat glasses, and a warm smile. To the casual eye, she was the perfect landlady, a sweet elderly woman opening her home to those in need. Her boarding house in Sacramento, California, was a refuge for the elderly, disabled, and those down on their luck. But behind the lace curtains and polite demeanor, Dorothea was hiding something unspeakable. Born Dorothea Helen Gray in 1929 in Redlands, California, her early life was marked by tragedy and instability. Her parents were both abusive alcoholics. Her father died of tuberculosis when she was just 8 years old, and her mother died in a motorcycle accident a year later. Dorothea grew up in orphanages and foster homes, learning early how to lie, manipulate, and survive in a world that offered her little kindness. As a young woman, she married multiple times, adopting new names and identities. Her charm and ability to reinvent herself became tools for both survival and deception. She spent time in jail for fraud, forgery, and running a brothel, but each time she emerged, she reinvented herself as a caring, respectable woman. By the late 1970s, Dorothea was running a boarding house at 1426 F Street in Sacramento. Her tenants were often vulnerable people, elderly, disabled, or struggling with addiction. She cooked meals for them, gave them a place to live, and even helped them manage their Social Security benefits. To neighbors and even local social workers, she seemed like a saint. But what they didn't know was that Dorothea had found a way to turn kindness into profit, and her method was deadly. The first signs of trouble came when tenants began disappearing without explanation. Dorothea would tell social workers that the tenants had moved away suddenly, sometimes with new jobs or family waiting for them. She always had a believable story. But the truth was far darker. Dorothea had begun poisoning her tenants with lethal doses of sleeping pills. Once they were incapacitated, she smothered them or let them die in their sleep. Then, she would bury their bodies in her backyard, plant flowers over the disturbed soil, and continue to collect their Social Security checks. It was a plan as cold as it was calculated. Throughout the 1980s, suspicions occasionally surfaced, but Dorothea was skilled at deflecting attention. Social workers who visited the house saw a clean, welcoming environment. The elderly tenants spoke of her kindness, those who were still alive, at least. Everything began to unravel in 1988 when a social worker named Judy Moise became concerned about one of her clients, a man named Alberto Montoya, who was developmentally disabled and schizophrenic. Montoya had suddenly gone missing, and Dorothea's explanation didn't add up. Judy reported her concerns to the police. When officers arrived at Dorothea's home, she seemed cooperative, but her body language was tense. They noticed the backyard, neat flower beds, a small garden, and decided to investigate further. As they dug into the soil, they made a horrifying discovery: the body of a tenant buried just feet from the back porch. The digging continued, and more bodies emerged. One after another, the grim count rose. 7 bodies in total were exhumed from Dorothea's backyard. All had been tenants who mysteriously disappeared. The news sent shockwaves through Sacramento, and soon the House Landlady became a household name. But Dorothea wasn't there to face the immediate fallout. Shortly after the first bodies were found, she slipped away, boarding a bus to Los Angeles. She checked into a motel and, astonishingly, began chatting with an elderly man at a bar, telling him she was looking for someone to manage her finances. But her face was already plastered across newspapers and television. A man at the bar recognized her from the news and contacted the authorities. Dorothea was arrested in Los Angeles and brought back to Sacramento to face trial. The prosecution painted her as a manipulative predator who targeted the most vulnerable, killing them for financial gain. The defense claimed she had never killed anyone, that the deaths were from natural causes and that she buried the bodies to avoid trouble. The jury didn't believe her. In 1993, Dorothea Puente was convicted of 3 murders and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Prosecutors believed she had killed many more, possibly over a dozen victims, but lacked sufficient evidence to prove all of the cases in court. In prison, Dorothea maintained her innocence to the very end. She wrote letters, gave interviews, and even sent out recipes, insisting she was simply a misunderstood caretaker. Yet for the families of her victims, there was no doubt about her guilt. Dorothea Puente died in prison in 2011 at the age of 82. Her legacy remains one of the most chilling in true crime history, proof that evil can hide behind the most harmless face. This is the story of a landlady who turned her home into a graveyard, her kindness into a weapon, and her boarders into victims. A woman who fooled an entire community, until the truth quite literally came to the surface. You are watching Twisted Truth. Like and subscribe for more unknown twists.